This is PIX on Politics with Dan Mannarino.
And welcome to PIX on Politics. I'm Henry Rosoff in for Dan Mannarino this week. We are now officially in the Mamdani era. Mayor Zohran Mamdani sworn in this week as the city's first Muslim mayor and the youngest mayor in more than 100 years. He addressed crowds of thousands, promising to be a mayor for all while staying true to the messaging that got him to this point. His first action as mayor, signing executive orders related to housing, creating task forces to speed up housing construction and get New Yorkers into those homes quickly. He also toured the deteriorating conditions. You see it there in Prospect Lefferts Gardens. That building, along with nearly 100 others in bankruptcy proceedings right now, set to be auctioned off to a new owner who also ranks among the worst in the city.
In those buildings alone, there are more than 5,000 open hazardous violations and 14,000 complaints. This is an untenable situation. So today we are announcing that we will be taking action in the bankruptcy case, stepping in to represent the interests of the city and the interests of the tenants and say once and for all who this government will be fighting for.
So it's clear the mayor is keeping housing a priority, and today the new deputy mayor for housing, Leila Bozorg, goes on the record. Leila Bozorg, thank you for coming on PIX on Politics.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So let's talk about the inauguration. You're sitting on the dais. You're listening to the new boss give a speech. He does anything but lower expectations. In fact, if anything, he raises them. So as one of his top staffers, a deputy mayor, one of 5, right?
That's right.
What are you sitting thinking? No pressure, right?
Man, yesterday was so fun. It was a really inspiring event. People braved the cold in kind of tens of thousands. And I think for the first time, we opened up the inauguration to go beyond City Hall Plaza. There was a big block party. People really braved the cold to come out in the tens of thousands. And it was really a celebration of what this administration is going to be doing. It's a new era of governance and a new era of how the city is going to operate.
But it feels like he really wants to move with some urgency. And then he went with you, among others, immediately to Brooklyn to talk about housing, signed 3 executive orders. I mean, it really sent the message that housing is a top priority for this administration, if not priority number 1. What do people need to know about these first 3 actions that he took? Sure,
absolutely. I mean, in addition to celebrating, we got to work right away. So we went from the inauguration to Brooklyn. We went to a building in Brooklyn where there's been a known bad landlord, where we both announced 3 EOs as well as an action that we're looking to take. So in terms of the executive orders, the first one reestablishes the mayor's office to protect tenants. And we designated a new executive director, Sia Weaver, who's a longtime champion for housing and tenants in New York City. And that office is really going to be charged with coordinating efforts to make sure we're using all the tools in the city's toolbox to protect tenants, when necessary, go after bad landlords, and really make sure government is being very responsive to the needs and issues that tenants bring to agencies and to City Hall.
And then the other 2 are effectively task force being led by you, one on speeding up permitting, cutting out red tape, another on using city-owned land to do development. Do I have those both correctly?
That's right. So Executive Order 4, we're calling it the LIFT Task Force, Land Inventory Fast Track, asking city agencies to look at land that's in their jurisdiction and evaluating where it's appropriate to consider moving facilities or co-developing facilities.
And we've seen this with libraries a lot,
That's
right?
Like
libraries end up with apartments over them.
And so it's that a previous executive order had actually expired. So this kind of renews it, brings more agencies into the fold, and really demonstrates that we're going to be looking to use all of the tools at the city's disposal, especially when it comes to leveraging public land and leveraging the public's role in these public-private partnerships.
I think a lot of people hear the word task force, though, and they think, oh, a group that meets once a month, and then maybe 100 days later, maybe there's a report, and maybe you pay attention to that report. How are you going to ensure these task forces actually deliver results and do it quickly?
Well, this mayor has been very clear that a huge focus is going to be around excellence in governance. So even within that executive order, we've listed some deadlines as well as some unit targets. So what will come from that is actual new opportunities to build housing.
And what are the deadlines and unit targets? Because those are the metrics, right?
Yeah. So on the LIFT task force, by July 1st, we want to have an inventory of new opportunities to build close to 25,000 5,000 new homes across the identified sites. The speed task force, similarly, we've set a target for when the recommendations would come in and actions that we can be taking immediately. And that, again, as you mentioned, is really going to be focused on kind of the soup to nuts, from everything from pre-certification up until lease up. You know, the lottery process, folks have identified a lot of issues. We've made some great improvements in that, but there's more to do to make sure that we are actually moving development as fast as possible and getting people into homes as fast as possible.
And then the Office of Tenant Protections, you mentioned it already, talked about it a little bit. If I'm a New Yorker sitting at home, when do I reach out? I mean, is it my landlord won't fix a toilet, or is it, you know, the whole roof is leaking? I mean, what qualifies to where you want New Yorkers to be approaching the mayor's office in this in particular?
Well, there's several ways to go about this. The most important thing to do if a tenant is experiencing issues is to call 311. Those get routed to agencies that are in charge of code enforcement. But the mayor's office to protect tenants now is going to be responsible for working with those agencies to make sure we're actually addressing issues swiftly and evaluating, are there things within the process between 311 and agencies and City Hall that we need to be fixing better so that we can be responsive as fast as possible.
Of course, Mayor Mamdani's signature promise during the campaign was to freeze the rent on roughly 1 million units of rent-stabilized housing. What is the work between now and when the Rent Guidelines Board votes in June that your office needs to do to make sure that promise is kept?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we have the opportunity to appoint 4 new members to the Rent Guidelines Board. A chair, a public member, an owner representative, and a tenant member. So we're going to be working hard to identify the right folks to nominate to the Rent Guidelines Board, and then working with the board to effectuate on the promise.
And you'll develop, let's say, research, because in theory, this is an independent board that's supposed to evaluate data. So will you be working to produce the data they need to justify a rent freeze?
So the Rent Guidelines Board has a staff. There's an executive director and staff. It is up to the Rent Guidelines Board to determine what is appropriate in terms of rent increases. And they have to take a lot of factors into consideration. They have to take factors like building conditions. They have to take the finances of buildings, taxes. But they also have to take into consideration the economic conditions for tenants and tenants' ability in this environment to be able to pay more rent. And so we're confident that when the Rent Guidelines Board looks at all of the things that they're supposed to look at, they'll vote the way we're expecting.
Anytime Mayor Mamdani is asked about concerns landlords might have about this plan, not just one rent freeze, but he's hoping to do this at least 4 times, perhaps more if he's reelected, he says, well, there's this office, they can open their books, especially small landlords, and get some help. I imagine that's within your portfolio. So what options are actually available to landlords that say, hey, I get it, Mayor, you know, my tenants are struggling, but I'm hurting too? Yeah,
this is certainly an issue that is very real and serious. There is considerable distress in the rent-stabilized stock and in some multifamily buildings. A huge part of my work and the work of the team is going to be focused on housing quality and preservation of buildings in general. Rent increases are not the only way to preserve buildings. And in fact, rent increases alone cannot preserve buildings, especially with the type of distress we see. So a huge part of the work is about identifying how to bring more landlords into the fold and using our city tools. We have a number of preservation tools. These are tools where we can provide loans to buildings to fully rehab them and put them on stronger financial footing. We've also talked a lot about our property tax system being kind of one of the core issues and core sources of problems for buildings. There's also things like water fees and fines. So we'll be looking at the whole gamut of tools that actually help buildings become more sustainable. This economic environment has been really hard on building owners. You've had insurance costs go up, inflationary environment. So we absolutely have to bring the city's tools to be supporting those buildings and improving housing quality as well. This is really about balancing those needs.
But will those tools be forward-facing enough by the time a rent freeze rolls around where the landlords can really, in a real tactile way, access those tools and ask for that help?
That's the goal. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is going to be a huge part of our housing work. Those 3 EOs combined really do demonstrate our focus really is about protecting tenants, which part of that is also about ensuring that we are bringing the preservation tools and the tools that landlords need to sustain their buildings to the table and bolstering those with more resources. That's going to be part of this, as well as firing on all cylinders for more development, while also making sure government is working best and kind of cleaning up all the bureaucratic processes that we control to help development move faster.
And just because I have just a couple seconds left and people are getting to know new members of this Mamdani administration, give me a couple fun facts about yourself. What do people need to know?
Oh, man. I am a very kind person. I'm a fun person. I live in Chelsea with my wife, who's a comedian. And yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of hobbies.
So if I go to the Comedy Cellar, I might see your wife?
She's not at the Comedy Center, but she's at the Upright Citizens Brigade quite a bit. And I try to go to as many of her shows as I can.
Very cool. Leila Bozorg, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Likewise.
Comedian. That's fun. Mayor Mamdani will also need the help of the city comptroller to pay for his agenda. And up next, the newly sworn comptroller Mark Levine will discuss making these plans a reality and closing the major deficit in the city's budget. PIX on Politics will be back in 2 minutes.
You're watching PIX on Politics with Dan Mannarino.
And welcome back to PIX on Politics. I'm Henry Rosoff, filling in for Dan this week. A key to Mayor Mamdani's big agenda, finding the funds to pay for it. And that's where the city's new chief financial officer may come in. Mark Levine is taking on that role as the newly elected city comptroller. He was sworn in during the same ceremony as Mamdani at City Hall on Thursday. And in his first address as comptroller, he acknowledged the tall task ahead, but says New Yorkers must be bold. And Comptroller Levine is joining me now. Comptroller, thank you for coming on PIX on Politics.
Oh, Henry, thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Let's just zoom out a little bit and talk about the significance of Thursday. You pointed out during your address 3 oaths of office taken on 3 different books of worship. Why is this an important moment for New Yorkers?
It's the start of a new era for the city, for city government. It's a historic moment, quite significant that we've inaugurated our first Muslim and first South Asian mayor. And I did find the diversity of the 3 of us being sworn in together to be quite powerful. I think it says a lot about the city that we can have a Muslim mayor, a Christian public advocate, and a Jewish comptroller. And we all share common goals to make this city more affordable. And I certainly plan to use the tools in my office to do that. But yesterday was about the big picture. And I came away feeling inspired.
So let's get into the job itself. As you mentioned, you vowed to work with the mayor, specifically on funding, housing, and universal child care. Have you spoken with Mr. Mamdani specifically about your plans to leverage your office and help in those efforts?
Yes, I have, and our teams have spoken. And we've also spoken to State Comptroller Tom DiNapoli, particularly about the potential to mobilize some of our pension money. The affordability crisis has been my #1 priority, really, since my days as borough president. Done everything I can to build more housing and more affordable housing in Manhattan. I'm going to take that citywide now. And you might know, Henry, that as hard as it is to find locations to build housing, finding financing for housing, affordable housing, is even harder. And there's projects that languish for years, sometimes a decade, waiting in the queue for financing. And we think we can help speed that up dramatically by investing more of our city pension money in a way that's prudent, that gets good returns for retirees, of course, but that can finance construction of new housing that wouldn't otherwise be built. And I've talked to the mayor's team about that. They're very excited, and as is the state comptroller. I think we had the potential, according to our calculation, to finance as much as 70,000 new units of affordable housing across the 5 boroughs in the next decade by this strategy. That would really be a game change, and it will be my #1 priority.
Of course, you've been big on, when you were Manhattan Borough President, identifying locations. You did a big report on that. It sounds like Mayor Mamdani is starting a task force to really follow up on that work. Do you see the financing you're talking about mainly funding efforts to build on public land, or not necessarily just that set of housing?
No, not necessarily at all. There could be a private sector project that might otherwise be fully market rate, and by putting some of our investment in there, we could secure a portion of those units for affordability. That'd be a great win for the city and also for the pension fund. There's many creative ideas we have that are sound, that will move the needle. And look, I think we need an all of the above approach to dealing with our housing crisis. We have probably a need to build 500,000 units of housing. And so we're going to need to mobilize more public resources, but we've also got to get the private sector as a partner here if we're going to achieve these bold goals, and I think we must.
Of course, your office tasked with auditing city agencies and being somewhat of a check on the mayor in that respect. We've seen previous tensions between comptrollers and mayors because of this adversarial role that was set up in the city charter. What is your personal philosophy on striking a balance between working with the mayor we were just talking about and criticizing the mayor?
Well, look, I want the mayor to succeed. I want New York City to succeed. I love the city. I want to do everything I can to help make sure that we succeed and that the mayor succeeds. I'm also an independently elected comptroller with a charter mandated obligation to provide oversight and accountability. And to me, that means calling out the successes when we achieve them, and I hope they are many, but also being willing to push back if I feel that we've gotten off track. That is the balance that an independent comptroller will strike. And I will be totally independent. It's a critical function of the office. As you said, audit, oversight, investigation power over every agency of city government. But I want to say that I'm going to be about solutions and not just about playing gotcha. I want city government to be the best it can be. And as the deputy mayor was describing in your previous segment, that includes improving city agencies. Right now, the delays to build affordable housing are unacceptable. Probably got to add a year and a half to the timeline just to get the paperwork approved. And that means there's a family in a homeless shelter for another year and a half. So that's an example of a way I would use audit to identify a problem, but also to push for better systems so we get the best city government that New Yorkers can get.
And on actions by the mayor, I mean, he's already catching some criticism for undoing an executive order by Mayor Adams that changed the definition of anti-Semitism back to what it was under the Biden administration, to be clear, and to be less aligned with supporting Israel. But he did keep the Office to Combat Anti-Semitism. The DOJ says it's now going to investigate. Do you have any concerns about any of these initial moves that have drawn some initial criticism?
Look, I do support the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which in my view is balanced and does allow for nuance. It does not stipulate that all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, but it defines cases where it does cross the line. So I was pleased to see that the city had adopted that standard. But the mayor has said repeatedly that he's very, very committed to combating anti-Semitism and to keeping all New Yorkers safe. And he has members of his administration, such as Commissioner Jessica Tisch, who I know well and are very committed to that. So I'm optimistic that we will meet those high standards, and I'll be here to make sure that we do.
Quickly on the deficit here, as we've got about a minute left to go, the city's facing about a $2 billion budget deficit. That could jump to as much as $8 billion the following year. In the comptroller's office, what do you do? What can you say about trying to close that gap, especially as the city's trying to pay for more expensive things right now?
The first is to offer an honest accounting of where we are fiscally. And the truth is, we really haven't had one. We've had a practice dating back years of dramatically understating expenses that we know we are going to occur.
Like police
and
overtime?
Then running into a deficit at the end of the year. And that has happened again this year. Mm-hmm. It's a problem that we need to fix. But I think it also points out, I think my job is also to point out ways we can save money with the resources that we do have to close the gap, to help identify priorities if we have to make tough choices, and look at the potential for new revenue as necessary as well. I view my role as providing oversight to the budget as being one of the central functions of the office. That would be true at any time, but given what I see as some fiscal challenges ahead, more than ever. And lastly, very quickly, I don't think these challenges mean we can't do bold things. I think that we can both be fiscally prudent and also invest in new initiatives, such as expanding the offering of free childcare. So I'm going to be both a voice for financial prudence, but also pushing for bold initiatives to meet New Yorkers' needs.
Comptroller Levine, we appreciate you coming on PIX on Politics. Next time, we'll save a little time to talk about your tips for signing up for Duolingo and learning. Is it 4 languages you speak, sir?
You got it. Well, tell your wife, muchísimas gracias.
Yeah, will do. Thank you. And still to come, a look at one of the major appointments of the Mamdani administration, the school's chancellor. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Just one day before Mayor Mamdani took office, he finally named his school's chancellor. Kamar Samuels will guide the city's education department in a time when parents are asking for more say and involvement in the operation of schools. I was there for the announcement this week, which included a major policy change from the mayor.
A new future feels very near indeed.
In his last public appearance before taking the oath of office, Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani introduced Kamar Samuels as his choice for New York City Schools Chancellor, along with several other appointments, including his Buildings Commissioner, Chief Climate Officer, a point person for the Universal Child Care effort, and the powerful Deputy Mayor for Operations. Samuels is the current superintendent of Manhattan's 3rd District, spanning the Upper West Side, Morningside Heights, and parts of Harlem. In recent years, he's spearheaded sometimes difficult conversations about merging and desegregating schools, along with scaling back gifted and talented programs across younger ages.
In every role, my focus has been the same: delivering results, rooted in care, clarity, and high expectations.
Parents like Kalira Salas tell us the incoming chancellor, who has public school-aged children himself, is unafraid to make tough decisions but operates in a thoughtful way.
I know him to be someone that always comes to the table to have really difficult conversations.
Parents are looking for more detail from the incoming mayor and new head of schools.
Mayor-elect Mamdani has not given us an indication on how he's going to engage in that process to phase in community control.
And in fact, now Mamdani says he favors keeping mayoral control of schools as opposed to a community-based model he talked about while campaigning.
I will be asking the legislature for a continuation of mayoral control, and I will also be committed with my incoming schools chancellor to ensure that the mayoral control we preside over is not the same one that New Yorkers see today. It will be one that includes more involvement, more responsibility, more accessibility.
And we will be right back. Coming up next week on PIX on Politics, New York Governor Kathy Hochul. You don't want to miss that. I'm Henry Rosoff, wishing you a happy new year, and I'll see you Monday.